Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations.
Pope Leo recently gave an address to a Catholic NGO working on migration. A lot of that happening lately. Seems to be the issue the church seems most desperately focused on these days for whatever reason, instead of, correcting secular leaders who are trying to combat the crisis of immigration going on and are going too far. That would be fine. While also telling those who are trying to come to Western countries that they need to actually do so the right way. That would be fine also, but there's not a lot of that being done. It's just usually calling leaders to task. We saw that even from the Pope in his recent apostolic exhortation. And the Pope gave an address to one such NGO. This is a short excerpt from it. I'm going to give you the whole document, actually, because it's really short. But this user on X said, Leo said in an address today being the 10th of October, quote, "The Catholic Church has always defended religious freedom for all people," thus demonstrating that he, Pope Leo, needs a more historically literate editor, and also that popes can err on historical matters. Link below. We've got a link below here to the actual address. Pope Leo was wrong in what he said there, just factually wrong. The Catholic Church has not always been on the side of, quote, religious freedom. You want to talk about stonecutter concept? That is a stonecutter concept. The Church has always said error has no rights. It has, in the name of peace and tranquility, domestic tranquility, allowed certain countries historically to allow non-Catholic religions in their countries with restraints on them. Not able to publicly evangelize, publicly recruit. But historically, in Catholic countries, either those other religions weren't allowed at all, or they were kept on a short leash. That's toleration. That's not religious freedom. The Church has not always allowed for religious freedom. I'm going to show you what Pope Leo said, and then I'm going to show you what people are basically calling his namesake had to say on this issue. Pope Leo the 13th is his Leonine predecessor from a century and a half ago. First, we'll go to the Pope's address. Address of Pope Leo the 14th to a delegation of aid to the Church in need. Given on Friday, 10th of October, 2025, in the Hall of the Popes. Only available in English and Italian at the time of the recording. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, peace be with you. Good morning to all of you, and welcome, dear brothers and sisters. I am pleased to greet you, dear members of Aid to the Church in Need International, as you gather in Rome during this Jubilee of Hope. Your visit is timely, for our world continues to witness rising hostility and violence against those who hold different convictions, including many Christians. In contrast, your mission proclaims that, as one family in Christ, we do not abandon our persecuted brothers and sisters. Here he is talking about migrants. Rather, we remember them, we stand with them, and we labor to secure their God-given freedoms. The words of St. Paul reminds us, quote, "If one member suffers, all suffer together." Though these words echo in our hearts today, for the suffering of any member of Christ's body is shared by the whole Church. It is with this truth before us that I address you this morning. Every human being carries within his or her heart a profound longing for truth, for meaning, and for communion with others and with God. This yearning rises from the depths of our being. For this reason, the right to religious freedom is not optional but essential. Rooted in the dignity of the human person, created in God's image and endowed with reason and free will, religious freedom allows individuals and communities to seek the truth, to live it freely, and to bear witness to it openly. It is therefore a cornerstone of any just society, for it safeguards the moral space in which conscience may be formed and exercised. Religious freedom, therefore, is not merely a legal right or a privilege granted to us by government. It is a foundational condition that makes authentic reconciliation possible. When this freedom is denied, the human person is deprived of the capacity to respond freely to the call of truth. What follows is a slow disintegration of the ethical and spiritual bonds that sustain communities. Trust gives way to fear, suspicion replaces dialogue, and oppression breeds violence. Indeed, as my venerable predecessor, Pope Francis, observed, quote, "There can be no peace without freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and respect for the views of others." For this reason, the Catholic Church has always defended religious freedom for all peoples. We'll pause there. This is what we're talking about here, the main thrust of this. And look how he says, always, his evidence for this. Quote, back to him. For this reason, the Catholic Church has always defended religious freedom for all peoples. The Second Vatican Council in Dignitatis Humanae declared that this right must be recognized in the legal and institutional life of every nation. The defense of religious freedom then cannot remain abstract. It must be lived, protected, and promoted in the daily lives of individuals and communities. It was from this conviction that your organization was born. Founded in 1947 in response to the immense suffering left in the wake of war, its mission from the beginning has been to foster forgiveness and reconciliation, and to accompany and give a voice to the Church wherever she is in need, wherever she is threatened, wherever she suffers. For more than 25 years, your Religious Freedom in the World report has been a powerful instrument for raising awareness. This report does more than provide information, bears witness, gives voice to the voiceless, and reveals the hidden suffering of many. He goes on like this. I want to show you why he's wrong. Because the Catholic Church has not always been for religious freedom. I mean, come on. That was one of the key issues that caused Archbishop Lefebvre to start the SSPX, to take the position he did. Dignitatis Humanae is one of those documents that he cites. If you want to know what he has to say about things, by the way, I have an educational video for many of you watching this later in the day, already live now, of Archbishop Lefebvre giving an address in 1988 on that very subject, on whether or not the post-conciliar church is actually the Catholic Church, or if it's something else. It's an eye-opening address he gives. But that was most of Pope Leo's delegation to a delegation of aid to the church in need. And now we'll go to his Leonine predecessor, Pope Leo XIII, who issued a document called Libertas in 1888. Encyclical Pope Leo XIII on the nature of human liberty. Now, I have the full text of this on the channel already. It's long, so long I'm definitely not going to go over the whole thing here. I mean, but here's what he has to say. He responds to those who do not agree with the Church's take on the separation of church and state. The Catholic Church has always rejected, until Vatican II, the separation of church and state. Not that the Catholic Church is advocating for theocracy, but that the church and the state should work as partners to create a stable world in which you can pursue the gospel and pursue your salvation. And the state has to help the church with that, to create the conditions where people aren't forced to do things to survive that will deny them heaven. Basically, the short version. Here's a section of what Leo XIII has to say, and you will notice it conflicts exactly with what Pope Leo XIV had to say. Quoting his Leonine predecessor. Lastly, there remain those who, while they do not approve the separation of church and state, they nevertheless think the church ought to adapt herself to the times and conform to what is required by the modern system of government. Such an opinion is sound if it is to be understood of some equitable adjustment consistent with truth and justice, insofar, namely, that the church, in the hope of some great good, may show herself indulgent, and may conform to the times in so far as her sacred office permits. But it is not so in regard to practices and doctrines which a perversion of morals and a warped judgment have unlawfully introduced. Religion, truth, and justice must ever be maintained, and as God has entrusted these great and sacred matters to her office, as to disassemble in regard to what is false or unjust, or to connive at what is hurtful to religion. From what has been said, it follows that it is quite unlawful to demand, to defend, or to grant unconditional freedom of thought, of speech, of writing, or of worship, as if these were so many rights given by nature to man. For if nature had really granted them, it would be lawful to refuse obedience to God, and there would be no restraint on human liberty. Likewise follows that freedom in these things may be tolerated wherever there is just cause, but only with such moderation as will prevent its degenerating into license and excess. And where such liberties are in use, men should employ them in doing good, and should estimate them as the Church does. For liberty is to be regarded as legitimate, insofar only as it affords greater facility for doing good, but no farther. Whenever there exists, or there is reason to fear, an unjust oppression of the people on the one hand, or deprivation of the liberty of the Church on the other, it is lawful to seek for such a change of government as will bring about due liberty of action. There is your papal permission for the removal of governments and the establishment of a new one. By this very line here, he would have justified removing Henry VIII or his son from the throne and replacing him with a Catholic. In such case, and excessive and vicious liberty is not sought, but only some relief for the common welfare, in order that, while license for evil is allowed by the state, the power of doing good may not be hindered. And it goes on to talk about these things. To understand what he's saying more easily, there's an old Catholic saying, error has no rights. We talk a lot, another phrase you sometimes hear, we talk a lot about the dignity of man and the rights of man. Perhaps we should speak about the rights of God. It's hard for our modern ears to hear this, that the church condemns freedom of religion. It had until Vatican II. Vatican II was called by Joseph Ratzinger the anti-syllabus of errors. The syllabus of errors was promoted and promulgated in the 1870s by Pope Pius IX, who had issued a document that listed ideas, and they were condemned. And freedom of religion was one of them. Excuse me. There were others condemned as well. The Second Vatican Council practically used the syllabus of errors and undid the syllabus of errors. We know that from Joseph Ratzinger's own testimony on the matter. So to say that the Catholic Church has always supported this is simply an error. But I will go back to this. I will show you what he's talking about here. Here's what Leo said in that paragraph. Note what he says about the church and always. The qualifying sentence here. For this reason, the Catholic Church has always defended religious freedom for all people. The Second Vatican Council in Dignitatis Humanae declared that this right must be recognized in the legal and institutional life of every nation. That is his qualification. Some of us have noticed that virtually all of the post-conciliar popes, including the ones you like the most, tend to act like the church barely existed, if at all, before Vatican II. That it is truly something new on the world stage. You don't have to be a sedevacantist to have noticed that. And that's another statement we can add to the long list of evidence of the attitude prevailing. So, I don't think he's lying when he says the church has always said this. The term now being used for this new institution was Cardinal Holleric's term, the New Synodal Church. One of the bishops in charge of the Synod on Synodality at the Rome level, at the Vatican level, coined that term. He called it that, not some podcaster with an axe to grind, but an actual Vatican official called it the New Synodal Church. And his definition of it was essentially completing the task established by Vatican II. But I'm curious what you think about this, so let me know in the comments, and hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps a lot too. Pray for the church, and pray for, the troll who came in basically telling people to leave the Catholic Church to go join, Pastor Bob's One True Church located in the strip mall next to Sears and Buffalo Wild Wings. You pray for that man. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.